Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming today to our Beyond the Scope series. I just want to mention before we get started too much what the plan is going forward. We'll be changing our times for our Beyond the Scope series to 4 p.m. and it'll be every other week from here on out through the end of the semester, starting in 2 weeks with Hank giving an introduction to TEM. And then we'll be talking about a visa with Thermo Fisher, and then keep on talking about some more TM work with EELS with Dave McComb. Hopefully we'll have the entire semester posted fairly soon, so people can see everything that we're going to be doing for the rest of the semester. Today we have Ashley Swartz. She's Assistant Director here at CEMAS. I think it's great having her here. She gets to take care of all the business operations and all that business stuff that I don't want to have to deal with. So I can focus on science with the rest of the scientists here. So it's great having her. She'll talk a little bit about what it is to operate a facility from a business standpoint. Thanks, Ashley.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley Swartz. As Dan said, I'm the Assistant Director of Strategic Initiatives at CEMAS. I'm really happy to be here with you this afternoon. I kind of named this talk, let me go back so you can see. Where do I start? My experience with building the business operations at a world-class core facility. Because 8 years ago, when I had the pleasure of starting my career at Ohio State and CEMAS, that was the exact question that I asked: where do I start? CEMAS already had a great reputation from our historical CEOF facility, and we had the reputation of being a world-class core facility. And I was part of a team that was supposed to make it work from the business and administrative side. So my first question was, where do I start? And so the next 30 minutes, I plan to just talk about some of the best practices that I found helped me be successful in my role, and hopefully keeps our reputation of being a world-class core facility. So about this webinar, we talked a little bit about the business operations at a world-class core facility that we'll be talking about today. I'm hoping to make this a short talk. I tend to talk a lot, especially things that I'm passionate about, and I'm very passionate about CEMAS. So try to keep it to 30 minutes so we have plenty of time for question and answers. You can ask questions at any point. Just use the Q&A function in the webinar, or use the chat function as well. You can raise your hand. We have great moderators, so we'll be happy to help you out there. And if you have any sort of difficulties, just contact us using the chat functions, and hopefully we'll be able to troubleshoot. So a little bit about me and my background. I grew up in Canal, Winchester, Ohio, which is southeast from Columbus, Ohio. I'm actually sitting at home in Canal, Winchester still. So I grew up here in Canal, Winchester. I moved to Oklahoma City for 4 years with my husband, and we lived the military life for 4 years, and then we came right back. And we love Canal, Winchester so much that we decided to make a home here. I got my bachelor's degree in business administration from Ohio State's Fisher College of Business, so Buckeye through and through. And my career at Ohio State began in September 2012. I had just come back from Oklahoma. I previously worked at Ohio State as part of the work study when I was going to Ohio State for my undergrad. And I loved Ohio State and higher education so much that I knew I wanted to come back to Ohio State. I just wasn't sure in what capacity. And so I applied for a fantastic opportunity in the College of Engineering, working with Hamish Fraser. And CEMAS opened a short year later in September 2013. And so I had the great opportunity to be a part of CEMAS since our opening. I shared my Clifton strengths here. They are responsibility, adaptability, relator, disciplined, and analytical. If you're familiar with what strengths are, I highly encourage you to take them. It's been great getting to know about myself within those 5 strengths and how they can help me be successful in my career and how I can contribute to the success of our team here at CEMAS. I enjoy reading, movies, interior design, DIY or do-it-yourself, and family. I struggle typing DIY because I tend to get really frustrated, but especially since I've been spending more time at home due to COVID, I'm getting more and more comfortable with the power tools in our garage. And it's been fun to transform my home in a do-it-yourself capacity. I put some pictures on here, and the top picture is me and my family. We actually took that this morning. It was my son's first day of preschool. He's 3. So my son is Evan, and that is Jeremy, my husband. Over COVID, I've become obsessed with Hamilton. I listen to the soundtrack on repeat, so hopefully there's other fellow Hamilton lovers out there. I love Harry Potter. I am probably unhealthily obsessed with Harry Potter. But I'm healthily obsessed with my niece and my nephew, Carter and McKinley. Their picture is down there below. So enough about me. Let's dig into why you guys are here. So what exactly is a core facility? The National Institute of Health definition defines core facilities as a centralized shared research resource that provides access to instruments, technologies, services, as well as expert consultation and other services to scientific and clinical investigators. We are, as a core facility, expected to recover our cost or a portion of our cost of providing the service in the form of user fees. So essentially what this means is, although we are at a nonprofit institution, we are essentially a small nonprofit business. And so that is part of the rewarding yet unique challenges that we have here at CEMAS, is we're operating much like a business at a higher education institute. Highly encourage, if you're interested in core facilities, to read the literature. I put the citation there below. Northwestern University is a leader in core facility administration, and so they have published literature for building a sustainable portfolio of core facilities. And so really what I've learned a lot is through not only this publication, but the other 3 publications that Northwestern has, as well as the numerous resources that they have. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. But I like the diagram that they have here, and I wanted to share it with you all today because it perfectly in one sort of cartoon depicts what is essential to operating a core facility. And so you have here, you have personnel being one. So core personnel are an indispensable part of operating a core facility. Not only do you actually need the technical personnel there to operate your equipment, but you also need that expertise. And so at CEMAS, we have decades worth of electron microscopy expertise to help our faculty and our researchers push their research even further. Space is a huge component of having a core facility, especially an electron microscopy facility such as CEMAS. And so we used to be in the basement of a building over on academic campus. And not only did we outgrow that space, but it really wasn't helping CEMAS succeed to what we needed to be due to the complex environmental conditions that the electron microscopes need. And so we were able, fortunately enough, to get institutional investment, state investment to renovate a space on Kadier Road on West Campus. And so we now have a custom design space specifically for our electron microscopes, which makes my job easier. Institutional investment, that's the 3rd pillar there, is also very necessary. Core facilities are very expensive operations, not only due to consumables and service contracts and the personnel required to operate that core facility. And so often, we'll talk about a little bit later, but user fees sometimes aren't enough. And so institutional investment is essential and the 3rd pillar of having a successful core facility. And the 4th pillar is evaluation. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Evaluation is so important, not only to know your data and how you're performing, but to be able to report on that, those performance metrics to your stakeholders in order to get additional investment. I also want to apologize. I know that my colleagues who give their scientific talks have these really beautiful, colorful images that I, as a business operator, do not have. So I do apologize for that, but you will see a lot of words. So I put sort of some essential operational practices here. It's essential for a successful core facility to have a solid service offering. Know your services. In our case, it's the microscopes that we have, but in addition to that, the expertise that we're able to provide. So it's important to have a solid service offering, but in addition to that, what's the value proposition, or what sets you apart from your competitors? And so at CEMAS, we have our remote microscopy capabilities. We have our fantastic digital lecture theater, our fantastic educational opportunities. And so you really have to have something that sets you apart from your competitors. The second practice is having a solid rate structure. And I think that this is sometimes not so much spoken about in the core facility world, but it's really important to have a solid rate structure, or they are commonly referred to as recharge rates or user fees. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. Software is key. I think that is one of the most challenging aspects of being at a nonprofit institution is we're not readily, at least in my experience, given fantastic software that other for-profit businesses might have. And so you might see, you know, like Salesforce or industry leaders in all aspects of industry. They'll have Salesforce or Procter & Gamble have these really great software reporting mechanisms, and they're able to pull data really quickly. That's just something in my experience that we are still developing at Ohio State, and so it's not always readily available. So you kind of just have to make do with what you have. For example, we were fortunate enough to have the Office of Research at Ohio State bring aboard our facility online manager software right as we were opening CEMAS. And so we were really fortunate to have this. Previously, we were operating on sign-in sheets next to each microscope where each user would log their time, and then it would take human resources to enter all that data. Now that's all electronic. So that's really great. And that's something that we're a step above other facilities, is being able to have that data there. But areas that we still have to improve are things such as invoicing and data reporting. A lot of this, I'm hoping with the changes that are in Ohio State coming up will improve. But for example, you know, invoicing at CEMAS, we're still largely using Microsoft tools. So that's sort of one of the unique challenges that I think isn't often spoken about. It is essential to do an annual cost study. I know it's difficult being at a scientific research center and my colleagues are all scientists and they don't want to hear about costs and revenue, but from the business operations standpoint, it is essential to look at how are you spending, what are you bringing in each year, are we recovering our costs? Where do we have funds to invest? Where should we invest? And so it's really important to, at the minimum, look at this on an annual basis. Probably the most important, not necessarily operational practice, is to have a supportive team. Not only on our scientific side do we have a fantastic supportive team, but on the administrative and business side, we have a fantastic team. So I have, you know, I said I started in September 2012 and I was a part-time office associate then when I started, and 8 years later, I progressed to an assistant director position, and that was not all on my own. I couldn't have done it without my team. And so it's really important to have that team as part of a successful core as well. Also essential is to know your grant opportunities, both internal and federal. When I say internal, I mean at your institution. So if you are at Ohio State, this would be primarily through the Office of Research or through your college. If you are outside of Ohio State, that would be your head institution or your head college. Also with internal, there are federal opportunities. So, the National Science Foundation Major Research Instrumentation Program. On the other side, on the National Institute of Health, they have the Shared Instrumentation Grant and the High-End Instrumentation Program. If you're not familiar with these, I highly encourage you to look into them because they are one of the most competitive, but the most rewarding part of investing in capital equipment at your core facility. Our electron microscopes cost millions of dollars, and we wouldn't be able to do that without these such grant opportunities. So let's talk a little bit about rate structures. Blah, I know. But the fees have to come from somewhere. You have to generate the revenue from somewhere, and it starts with the rate structure. So at Ohio State, there are two situations to calculate rates. First being cost recovery. This is determined by estimating the cost of providing the product and service and dividing by the number of units expected to be provided. We'll do a little exercise on that in just a minute. And this is typically when you charge to federally sponsored funding, or at Ohio State, this also applies to general funds as well. So the goal of the cost recovery is in its title to recover your cost. The second rate structure is what's called a marketplace rate, where this would be the rate structure that you would charge to your external customers or your industry partners. And the marketplace rate is meant to reflect the going rate charged in the general community. And so for our center, and being an electron microscopy center, we would look at electron microscopy centers around us to see what they're charging. The two rate structures, cost recovery and marketplace, while that's what they teach us at Ohio State, it's pretty much the same nationally. But either rate must follow the White House Uniform Guidance Circular A21. I know this sounds like a lot of jargon and mumbo jumbo, but these are just tools that I learned throughout the past 8 years. The Uniform Guidance A21 is probably 72 pages that I sat down and read word for word and provided a wealth of knowledge. It also makes me really confident when I am presenting to our faculty advisory committees or any other committees on why we charge the way we charge. So let's do our quick exercise on our rate calculations, or our cost recovery rates. Again, this might seem really tedious and trivial, but it is essential. And so up here is kind of the language that we would use to build those rates, and then I put it in a more practical sense down here. And so the way that we charge to our internal Ohio State users, research and faculty, is through this mechanism, and it's meant to recover our costs of operating the microscope. And so you have your direct operating costs, the first being your personnel. So this is your microscope operators, your experts. This would be their salary and their benefits. And you also have your non-personnel costs. So this looks like, supplies and consumables. On our microscopes, we have service contracts, which are our largest expense. And this allows us to maintain 24/7 uptime. Well, our goal is 24/7 uptime on our microscopes. And so these are all costs that go into calculating our rate. The third aspect of adding into that is any subsidies or prior year balance. And so subsidies are what you might get from your head institutional to help with operating our costs. So for example, Ohio State may or may not give us funds to help operate our facilities and help lower our expenses. That way they can pass on those savings to their faculty and their researchers. And again, this just helps us bring our rate lower. You also want to include any prior year balance. So a surplus or a deficit should also be configured into your rate. And so this is what you have here. That's the meat of your rate calculation. And then you want to divide by the projected number of goods or services sold. So for CEMAS specifically, this would be the number of hours on our microscope. And it can be really difficult to judge what the following year is going to look like, right? At CEMAS, we try to use the previous year data. to calculate into that rate, or you could have a benchmark that you want to put in and say, this is the number of hours that we want to operate at. So after you do that division, then you have your cost or your rate. So quickly, let's do this in a number sense. Let's say your personnel and benefits is $50,000. Again, I just made up these numbers. They're not CMS specific. But let's say your salary and benefits are $50,000. Your non-personnel costs are $40,000. So then you have $90,000 there. But let's say your institution ABC says, we want to give you $5,000 towards your operating costs to help lower the rate to pass on those savings to your faculty. And so that would leave us with the meat. And then let's say we divide that by 1,000 hours. We hope our microscope will operate at 1,000 hours for the year, and that gives us $85 per hour. And so when you're at core facilities, you're looking at their rate calculations on their website, and you see this, what appears to be a random hourly rate. It's not random at all. This is how we get to our cost recovery rate. Best practices. I tried to put 8 years of knowledge into 2 columns here, so bear with me. The first best practice is to network, network, network. I say that I'm an extroverted introvert, so sometimes it's really hard for me to reach out to other people and to network, but it's been essential, not only for those that are also core facility administrators and directors, but also to scientists as well. You need to understand what's important to them, and our business leaders in our college and our university, we need to understand what's important to them as well. Second is know your resources. At a nonprofit institution, especially Ohio State, we're so large, it can really seem overwhelming to know where to even start looking for the resources you might want to know. And so this is where your networking will really come into play. But also hopefully you have a mentor or a supervisor you can reach out to know your resources. The third, really this should be first, is always keep your customer in mind. You know, whether this is faculty, users, research, graduate students, your external partners, always keep them in mind, especially from a business operations standpoint, and you're starting to think about the protocols, the procedures, the workflows, always keep them in mind. My goal is to create easy and seamless protocols. I want to make it as easy as possible for individuals to find us and to use us. An example of that at CEMAS is our user onboarding. And so we had, especially when we opened, but even now, you know, we get hundreds of inquiries every year on how to become a user at CEMAS. And it can be very difficult to find the information. And so what we did is we put it in one single space. So on this website, it has all the lists, a list of protocols to follow in order to become a user at CEMAS. And it also creates a form that comes to us, and we're able to respond to that based on your individual needs. And so this is something that, again, we just created as a way to sort of manage the workflow and the influx of users at CEMAS, and it's worked really great. Something that's been really important for me, I've only learned this within the past year or so, is learn how to communicate with your audience. And so my audience are mostly in 2 groups, one being scientists. So, you know, I work with CEMAS scientists every single day, and you know, when I'm talking with our director, our director is a scientist, so I need to learn how to communicate what I'm trying to communicate to them. And so you know, it's not helpful when I communicate to our scientists to talk in an accounting language. That's not helpful for them. It's not helping me communicate what I want to them. So I needed to learn how to communicate to them. On the flip side of that, when I'm meeting with our stakeholders and our leaders in our college and the individuals I report to up through our college, I needed to learn how to speak to them in an accountant way. So it's important to disseminate and keep those 2 separate. Something that's been huge for me is to determine workflows. You can see it in the background here a little bit of this slide. It is just something that I've come through. I did a little bit of lean practices and creating workflows with that and how to create lean organization. And so part of this is a workflow. And so it's literally a step-by-step instruction on what to do in a situation. So I've tried to create these workflows anywhere from, like we talked about earlier, the user onboarding process, all the way to our administrative staff when they get a form or an inquiry on anything from becoming a new user all the way to starting a new contract. We've implemented these workflows and these processes, and so hopefully anyone can follow them and be able to perform the job that they need to. Some examples of this can be, we interact with our internal Ohio State users differently than we interact with our external users, and there's different procedures for that. And so we have separate workflows for that. And importantly, communicate with your team. Don't just keep them on your desktop. I created these workflows. They were a way of taking everything that was up here and putting it on paper to see not only if it works for myself, but also works outside of that as well. So are people able to follow it? Does it make the most sense? How can we cut some of these steps out really to make this as easy, quick, seamless as possible? Another best practice, and very important, is to familiarize yourself with institutional policies. Again, in my world, in my experience, when we created CEMAS and I started to progress in my career, this was what I had to do was I had to sit in training for one day and learn about our earnings operation, or another word that they use for a small business at Ohio State. So I sat in an in-person training and I learned about accounts receivable, unrelated business income, export compliance. And so this information can be provided in a number of different ways based on your role within your core facility or at your institution. Very importantly, when you're serving users, is assess your course capacity to serve. So do you have the resources, both human and non-human? Is your primary responsibility to serve your internal users? So for example, if you have a really a workhorse piece of equipment and that's used 24/7, do you start to prioritize your internal users over your external users? These are all things that you need to evaluate as you assess your course capacity to serve. I know I've said this about each bullet point, but this is also very important, is anything you're doing, does it align with your mission? If you're working with a customer, if you're creating a new policy, do all of these align with your mission? And very important to creating a sustainable core facility, and this is something that I have learned within the last 6 months, is ensure the customer base is there before you invest in a new service line. All the scientists on this webinar will probably not like what I'm about to say, but scientists love to do breakthrough discoveries. They like to try out their hypothesis. They like to discover new things, and all of this takes initial funding up front. And so it's important for to create a sustainable core facility, and is ensure that if you invest in that service line, you're actually going to have the customer base for it to pay off. I am, again, talking too much, as I promised I would, but the next 4 slides are going to be 4 specific things that I did within my role that have not only made my job easier, but I've also gotten great feedback on them. And so I want to share them with you in case they might be helpful for you in establishing your core facility. So the first thing I want to share is succession planning is so important. My director, also one of my mentors, he's been really great at saying, succession plan, if something happens to you, or if you progress in your career, be sure that someone can fill in your shoes so you're easily able to take a holiday or a vacation or something like that. This kind of sparked when I went on maternity leave, and there was going to be someone filling in my shoes. And so I wanted to make sure that they'd be able to succeed. And so I created an administration handbook, and this has also served very great for me because I'm no longer our lead center administrator. And so this has been really helpful in succession planning for that aspect as well. And succession planning can look like all forms. They can be handbooks, they can be guides, it can be in-person trainings. For example, what you see here is I use the software Ohio State provides. It's called u.osu.edu. Any Ohio State individual is able to sort of have a blog, and so I created this site using their platform. But it essentially takes everything that's up here that I've learned over the past 8 years and put it in a web format. It's easily searchable. If I wanted to go on vacation, I don't have to worry about something falling apart when I'm away, is because it's all right there and really available for anyone to step in. Something else that's really important for succession planning is, of course, reference materials, but also explain why. Something I try to do when I am making decisions is explain why I'm making that decision. Or if I'm, producing a thought about something, I try to explain why I produced that thought. And so people can start to learn your thought processes, and hopefully it helps them with their decision making as well. The second best practice that I want to share with you is so important to have a strategic plan. As we mentioned, the core facility, although, Ohio State is our lead institution and your lead institution will undoubtedly have their own strategic plan. It's also essential for you as a small business, essentially, to have a strategic plan as well. And so at CEMAS, we were very fortunate to have the opportunity to go through a 6-week lighthouse journey, as we call it. We had a fantastic facilitator who spent 6 weeks with us to identify what our lighthouse is. And the lighthouse is a strong strategic vision for the future. It hurts a little bit. It's meant to be a stretch goal, but we did it as a team, and it was so refreshing to be able to develop our mission and our lighthouse and our why together. And so this helped us create our strategic plan. And our plan is a clear and actionable strategic direction. Any sort of direction that we make, we try to tie it back to our strategic plan. It's not a done document, it's constantly in works. And we have 2 versions. We have a stakeholder version that, we'll pass out to our stakeholders, and we also have an internal version, or what we call a work plan. And this spells out what our goals are, what are our objectives, and what's the work plan and what are the actions, the tactics to get us to those goals. I want to share the software I use for this. I try to do that when I'm showing any examples that I have, because sometimes software and knowing where to start, software is key. And so I use Microsoft Word and Adobe InDesign for this. The third example I want to get that, again, has been really important for me and my career at CEMAS is creating a financial plan. I will admittedly, I think I spent the first 4 years sort of blind into the details of our financial plan. I knew what our numbers were, and I knew the background behind what those numbers were, but I wasn't able to easily present on those because I sort of had no plan in place, and I didn't know where we were headed in the next 4 years. And so something that I put together was a financial plan. It was something I did out of, I understood the need for it, and I just knew it would make my job so much easier. And so this financial plan is probably an 18-page document, mostly of exhibits, but it just contains historical financial data and financial projections for the next 4 fiscal years. And so this helps us, with strategic planning and where we want to invest our time and our funds. It provides a glimpse into our customer base and our service offerings. So, this is also one of the succession planning tools I use. I'm hoping it's a living, breathing document. So, in 10 years, the individual and my physician are making the financial decisions for CEMAS is able to look back on this document and see why we made the decisions we made. It's important for the financial plan to have a common language for any audience. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So the audience of this financial plan is our director and our team at CEMAS, but the audience is also our Office of Research and our College of Engineering, those individuals and units that we report to as a core facility. Something else that's really great about this financial plan is it acts as a baseline for all the financial reporting I do. It has so much information that I can just pick and pull anything out from this plan and plug it into a presentation that I'm doing on any sort of activity. And so you can see just a glimpse of the table of contents and some of the things that I included in the financial plan. If you're interested in this, please feel free to contact me. I can kind of dive into the details and why I included some of the things that I did on this. The fourth tidbit I want to share with you is the reporting dashboard. This was something that I've done within the last couple of years. And it's been really helpful for me to know what our data is, but also reporting this out to our stakeholders and our internal team as well. You see a lot of this with like private organizations or industry, and you'll see these dashboards that they'll put out, you know, what their shares are, what their shareholders are, and all the dashboard information that comes along with that and how they're performing. This is essentially that for our organization. And so we pull the data directly from our facility management software, and then we take all that data and we compare it to what we've identified are our performance metrics and our key performance indicators. And so some of those performance metrics for us at CEMAS is how often are our instruments being used, how many users are we serving, how many departments are we serving, you know, what's our revenue look like, what's our cost recovery rate, what are the number of publications that are referencing our tools. These are all key performance metrics that we want to measure our progress on that. And the great thing about the dashboard is it reports data in a visual way for the audience to easily understand. So unfortunately, the data that we pull from the software is an Excel spreadsheet with just basic text. And so it's important for us, again, to translate this data easily for our audience, whether they are our audience are our scientists or our accountants. Come up with a reporting frequency. Right now, I'm only able to do them quarterly just because I don't have this software yet to support doing it in a more live way. So start at annually. That's what I did. I told myself I was going to start annually. I was able to do it quarterly, but start somewhere. And again, knowing your data and knowing where you stand in a performance way is essential for decision making. You know, if we were talking about investing in a new microscope, we would need to know the data on how our current microscopes are performing in order to make a wise decision about investing in a new piece of equipment. The software I used for this is just Microsoft Excel. I shouldn't say just Microsoft Excel. Excel is a great tool, but Microsoft also has a software called Power BI. It's on my downtime wish list to learn this, but at Ohio State, it is available for us to use as part of our Microsoft 365 package. From what I understand, it creates these dashboards in a very live, interactive way, and so you should definitely check it out. And then the way I report on the information is, again, just through that u.osu website. The fifth tip I have, again, we have our strategic plan and we have a financial plan, something else that's been really important for me, and I am just developing it over our quarantine/COVID-19 period as a marketing plan. So again, it's a lot of these things that we talked about as part of our lighthouse. It's a lot of the information that's part of our strategic plan, but it's putting it down on paper. You know, who is your target market? Again, we're operating as a small business. It's important to know who our target market is. What are our goals and objectives? What's our value proposition? Identify those key performance indicators and put it into tactics and for our communication plan. How are you going to publicize your services? How are you going to communicate to your target audience? And so again, I'm just developing this now, but I'm using Microsoft Word. But I also wanted to share a resource that I've been using is this marketing plan handbook. It's a really great tool. I have it here on my desk. It explains the framework of a marketing plan and it gives you examples. So if you're interested in creating a marketing plan, I definitely recommend you check out this book. here are five quick resources. I encourage you to start. If you don't know where to start with these five. Is again, Northwestern University is a leader in core facility administration. They have a central office that administers all the core facilities at their institution. They all report up to this core facilities administration, and they are very open to sharing their resources, which is great. So they have everything from the Microsoft Excel template they use to create their rates, all the way to how they evaluate their core facilities as an institution. And so I highly encourage you to check this out and learn from their best practices. The second resource, I had the great opportunity last November to attend Northwestern's Kellogg course, Leadership and Management in Core Facilities. This is a great way to network and meet peers in my field, but I learned a ton of leadership and tangible things to take away to lead a team, but also on how Northwestern administers their cores. So again, these are all information that I find really helpful to bring back to Ohio State and share within my core and beyond. There are two associations and organizations that I'm familiar with that deal with core facilities. The first being the Association of Biomolecular Resource Facilities, or ABRF. They are a national organization, and then they have a chapter, the Midwest Association of Core Directors, which at Ohio State we are a part of. So that's a chapter of the ABRF. But both of these organizations have meetings annually. I was fortunate enough to attend the MWACD chapter meeting a couple of years ago. Again, I was able to network. I was able to learn that I'm not alone, and a lot of the challenges that we're facing as a core facility out of Ohio State are spread throughout nationally as well. And then specifically at Ohio State, if you're a core facility, I encourage you to check out the Financial Planning and Analysis Office. That's through the Office of Business and Finance, and the Institutional Research and Planning. That's through Office of Academic Affairs. If you don't remember anything I said in this presentation, I hope that you remember these five things. The first is know your why. This is really important, not only as a leader, but also as an individual living and breathing, is to know your why. And so I know our why and our lighthouse and our mission at Ohio at CEMAS is, to be the world hub for advanced microscopy in all scientific disciplines. And so I'm able to live and breathe that through each decision I make at CEMAS. But I also know my personal individual why as a member of our team at CEMAS, and it's to facilitate research. Research is really important. And I didn't know that until I started working at CEMAS, and I've become very passionate. And I know my why is to facilitate that research, to let the scientists do their thing and make it as easy as possible for them to do their thing. The second is mentors are invaluable. I've had a handful of great mentors that they're just invaluable. You need your mentors to tell you the things that you're doing really great, but also importantly is the things that you shouldn't worry about anymore. I definitely had those moments where I'm stressing about things that I can't control, and I've had mentors who say, don't worry about things you can't control, worry about things you can control, and focus on your strengths. And so mentors are invaluable in that sense. Remember, success is a journey, not a destination. This is something that I'm still learning. I always thought that, growing the business operations at CEMAS, I would fully get there one day. And I've learned that as a growth mentality and to keep being better is part of the success. So I don't want to be the best. I just always want to be better. And so that's really helped me. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That was something when I first started, I wanted everyone to think I was an expert and super smart. And finally, humility got the best of me, and I was able to just ask for help. And that has provided so much practical and help throughout my career at CEMAS, but also asking for feedback. So again, this really came from getting to know my audience and how to communicate with them and ask for feedback on things that you're doing great and things that you aren't doing great, because that feedback will only help you grow yourself and help your team at your core facility. I included a book that I'm currently reading, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. It helps you communicate your why, not only to yourself, but other individuals. A colleague at CEMAS got this for me, and I've really enjoyed it so far. So upcoming events, this is, I'm so sorry, an old slide, but we have the updated information on our website, and we are switching our time to Wednesdays from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And I would not be the assistant director at CEMAS if I didn't make a shameless plug. Please follow us on our social media. YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, we're there. Keep up with our latest news by going to that CEMAS Keep Up. Thanks for spending time with me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.